Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Uncanny X-Men 154, cover dated February 1982. The cover is by Dave Cockrum, penciling and inking himself, but the most interesting and striking feature of the cover is this craft technique of the color hold for these new creatures that are revealed to be Sidri and hunters in the story inside. And the little grouping there, we've got Cyclops and Storm, but also Corsair of the Starjammers. And readers know, long-term readers know that Corsair is Cyclops' father, but Cyclops doesn't know that. Not yet, anyway. So, let's open this one up to the splash page. And we've got an action image there, but it's something unusual that's happening. It's the Danger Room in the ruins and remains of the X-Mansion. And we've got a little game of handball going on between Storm and Cyclops, and they're using their powers for the game. And it turns out at this point that Storm is beating Cyclops 15-14, and they're going to have one last shot here. Cyclops using his powers his optic blast to bop the ball around, and then he thinks to himself, aha, this last volley threw Storm a fraction off balance. She's given me the opening I was looking for. So we get an explanation in the narrative captions. A split second apart, Cyclops fires a pair of optic blasts in seemingly random patterns around the room. One flashes right in front of Storm, easily missing the ball, momentarily disorienting her before she can recover. The second beam ricochets off a wall behind her to deflect the ball onto the floor. So he wins. Your point. We're tied once more. That was a very nice and nasty move, Scott. Wolverine would have been proud of you. So Cyclops not above using tricky tactics in order to win the point, but they're both out of breath and sweating, and they decide to call it a draw. The latest in the series. Cyclops says, the games I win with experience are balanced by the ones you win with skill and vice versa. You're very good. You sound surprised, she asks, and he says, I like being the best. It's not easy getting used to having a rival, much less an equal. Come on, let's hit the showers. So that kind of establishes their mutual admiration, their mutual aptitude and skill as leaders of the X-Men, former and current, Cyclops and Storm. But then we get an interlude, a one-page interlude. And this concerns, it's interesting the way that Claremont starts this off with a little zoom in on Voyager 2, 1.5 billion kilometers out system from Earth, a tiny, tough, magnificent spacecraft rushes towards interstellar space. This is Voyager 2, an unmanned NASA probe that together with its companion craft Voyager 1 has astounded scientists and laymen alike with its breathtaking views of the outer planets. Its onboard systems since have been quiescent since Voyager departed Saturn orbit to conserve power for the Uranus flyby in January 1986. So from our vantage point of 2024 for this video review, that's all happened, and the Voyager spacecrafts are now outside the solar system proper. And indeed, I believe that Voyager 1 is beyond the heliopause, so beyond the influence of the sun. So that's amazing, like what's happened in the decades since Claremont wrote this particular comic. But it was all by way of drawing our attention to this unusual spacecraft from an advanced civilization, a starship indisputably alien, but its pilot is not. After 20 years, Major Christopher Summers, United States Air Force, is returning home to a planet and a sun he barely remembers. So the connection between Christopher Summers, Corsair of the Starjammers, and Scott Summers was revealed by Claremont in Uncanny X-Men 108. That was the first issue drawn by John Byrne, and Byrne himself was not a fan of the reveal, but Claremont wanted it and developed it in Uncanny X-Men 114, and developed a little bit more about Cyclops's perspective in terms of his being orphaned, his parents dying in the plane crash in issue 144. You might remember from reviews on the channel. So Corsair is thinking, I'm almost at the end of a journey I never thought I'd make. I wish the circumstances were different, but if they were, I probably wouldn't be here. Funny, as a kid, I always dreamed of exploring space. My dream came true. at the cost of everything I held dear. That's his family. And if I had it all to do over again, and then he's interrupted because the scanners indicate a Shi'ar dreadnought. But the reader's intrigued as to whether Corsair would have finished his thought by saying he'd do it all over again, losing his wife, losing his children. It's an interesting characterization of Corsair that we get in the course of this issue. A man with a family, but not a family man. So then we get an interlude, the island base of Magneto. Last seen in issue 150, he's abandoned it since the climax of that issue, when he had a change of heart regarding, motivated by his attack on Kitty Pryde and his realization that he had lost touch with his own humanity, and so he disappeared. But the island is there, and the X-Men with the X-Mansion ruined have decided to move towards it. And Nightcrawler here is thinking, I wonder if it is a safe haven for Illyana or the X-Men. And Professor X overhears him telepathically and says, considering how often the security of our mansion has been breached of late, Nightcrawler, would it have been any safer to remain at home? I doubt it. And Nightcrawler says, Professor, you read my thoughts? I apologize, Kurt, but they were so obvious and so strong I couldn't help it. You know there's a growing anti-mutant sentiment in the States. I fear, from what I've learned recently, that it may have official sanction. For the moment, it is simply too dangerous to remain in Westchester. So we have this overarching grand narrative that is being implied here regarding the growing fear and hatred of mutants. And also I wonder, does Professor X now know about Project Wide Awake, which was given the official go by the president at the end of issue 142. So, by the way, I like Cockrum drawing the professor in the safari suit here, and the little detail of Nightcrawler drinking the glass of water as well. These little human touches, I like them in the story, and also juxtaposed with the spacecraft here in Corsair hurtling towards Earth. And then we get an interesting scene here between Wolverine and Carol Danvers, and this is a reveal for readers. And by the way, Carol Danvers has been with the X-Men now since the conclusion of Avengers Annual 10. You'll find a review of that here on the channel. But we haven't really had Claremont focus too much on her. She's just been in the background. But here he gives some focus to her and the aftermath of what happened when her memory and very nearly her life were robbed at the hands of Rogue and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. But she's thinking to herself here, the more I learn and remember, the more I realize how much I've truly lost that can never be regained. So here's something interesting that we learn concerning her past. Wolverine sneaks up on her. She says to him, you startled me, I didn't hear your approach. No one ever does, he says. Pardon my asking, but didn't we meet a few years ago? Yeah, when you were Air Force Intelligence and I was Canadian Secret Service. You and your partner, Colonel Mike Rossi, and me ran some pretty hairy capers together. Those were good times. So that's really interesting. Claremont building in a shared past between Carol Danvers and Logan, and this would get explored throughout the length of his original run on the title. But Carol doesn't remember, and this enrages her and disturbs her because she feels nothing regarding the mention of Mike Rossi. She can't even see his face in front of her eyes. And then she apologized to Wolverine, and Wolverine's got her by the shoulder there to comfort her, and then in pops Kitty Pryde, being an annoying teenager. And I like the dialogue here from Logan saying, blast, what is it, Kitty? That was the wrong wall to phase through and the wrong time to do it. Oh yeah, I see that. The professor sent me to find you. You've done that. Now scram, I'm busy. But the moment is over. The moment has passed. Go, Wolverine. I'll be fine, really. But Claremont has seeded that now, that we're going to get more with Carol Danvers in the coming issues. She isn't going to be relegated to the background of the title. And then we get an interlude again, back with Christopher Summers. The craft is passing the moon, coming towards Earth. You can see North America there, focused on the globe, and also an interesting use of a screen tone there as well as part of the background. So he's evading the nuclear and energy blasts from the Shi'ar battleships that are engaging him. And then we cut to Westchester and to the X Mansion. Now it looks pretty all right there. It looks like that some of the damage done by the Sentinels has been mended. Let's put it that way. And here we have a scene where Scott Summers, Cyclops, is preparing lunch for himself and Storm, and they're the only members of the X-Men living at the X-Mansion for the moment. And this is exactly the kind of thing that drove John Byrne a bit crazy, where he said that Chris Claremont would basically just prefer to do a kind of like a domestic drama with the X-Men, just focus on their emotional lives, just have them sitting around the table having dinner, and this kind of thing. So it's funny to see this here, and Cockrum apparently having no problem with it, and Scott there thinking to himself, I must say I've outdone myself, though when it comes to cooking my standards are pretty low. So the dinner's ready, and Storm's coming in with the mail, which obviously, like, she's flown to the mailbox all the way at the end of the driveway out on Grey Malkin Lane, and come back with the mail, with the post, as we would say here. Anything interesting? Bills, magazines, circulars, the usual. Oh, here's a postcard from Kitty. Now this is interesting because long-time viewers of the channel will know I always point out the red background in a Glynis Oliver coloured X-Men issue, but here we've got a red background from Don Warfield, and it just doesn't work here. Glynis Oliver only uses the red background when it's a moment of heightened emotion and or violence, and here he's using it for Storm opening a postcard from Kitty Pryde, and it just doesn't work. Same again here. So we get the news from Kitty from the island. Everyone is well, though Carol seems quite depressed. And Cyclops here reads a letter from Emma Frost's Massachusetts Academy. So Emma's kept her word, and Kitty's admission has been revoked because it's too late in the term to take her on. That's the official reason. So she's going to stay at the school for gifted youngsters for another year at least. And then here we have this moment, which probably would have driven John Byrne mad if he had to draw it. You underrate yourself. This is all quite delicious. And Cyclops says, thanks. Scott, you called me your rival earlier. Am I? Do you wish to reclaim your old position as team leader? Do you wish to give it up? So this is interesting, and she says, I'm not certain. I took it reluctantly. The responsibility frightened me, but over the months, I've grown to accept it. I'm good at it, though I concede you're the best. And so he's thinking there to himself, he's thinking, again, thanks, but to be honest, I'm not sure I want the job back. And that's intriguing. So much has changed, is changing in my life. I feel like I'm at a crossroads. And he is indeed, and another change in his life is coming crashing into Breakstone Lake on the grounds of Professor X's mansion. And so they go to investigate. In a matter of seconds, both X-Men are in the water. But in that matter of seconds, they also get some breathing and communication devices. So they must have been readily available there in the dining room somehow. So I would say it would have been better to say in a minute both X-Men are in the water. But in any case, that's a really minor quibble. So they rescue the pilot from the spacecraft. And who could it be? Well, Storm and Cyclops both recognize that it's Corsair. And Storm thinks to herself, when Cyclops says it's Corsair, she says, he's far more than that, my friend, and I fear the time has come to break my oath never to reveal to you the truth about him. And that is that he is Scott's father. So here we get a little collage of moments. I suppose we would say, like in film terms, a montage of moments, key moments from Corsairs' past history. The plane crash, his wife there, Catherine Ann. Then so she's the one who puts the parachute on young Scott and pushes Alex into his big brother's arms and shoved the two boys out the escape hatch. Then she returned to her husband's side, and both of them were swept across the universe. Now, with the layout here, you want to read this panel next, but this is the next panel where she paid for her love and loyalty with her life. So the mad emperor, Shi'ar Emperor Decan, took her on as his concubine and then killed her. in front of Christopher. So that was awful. And then more recent memories scattershot across his mind's eye. So this is the backstory to why he's coming to Earth. An ambush days ago. 4 Starjammers versus a battalion of Imperial combat troopers. The odds were hopeless, regardless one of them had to get away to reach Earth to alert the X-Men. So why? Why was it necessary to alert the X-Men? We'll only find that out at the end of the issue. Corsair was the obvious choice. So while Chode and Raza and Ms. Hepzibah held off the Imperials, Christopher Summers fled into the night, and for the second time in his life feels his heart break. So up he wakes into consciousness again, and he says, "Good evening, Cyclops. Pardon my dropping in unannounced." So quite the understatement and dry wit. And Cyclops responds angrily, "Can the snappy patter, Corsair, explain this locket and these Air Force dog tags? The woman's face is," and he pauses, "familiar, and the 2 boys are me and my brother Alex. The tags are mine, Scott. The woman is my wife, the children my sons." So he responds angrily, "You're lying." And Storm there. And I like the body language from not Claremont, but Cockrum there, where her hands are coming up to her mouth. "Scott, forgive me," he's not. So she looks a little bit ashamed of, never having revealed the truth to Scott, but then she made that oath, that promise, that vow that she wouldn't. And then they're interrupted. So the emotional moment is interrupted by the arrival of these Sidrian hunters, and they're after Corsair. So we're still not getting the full story of why exactly he's come to Earth particularly, and why it was that he was making a beeline for the X-Men. So Scott says, "Well, they'll have to wait their turn until I get some answers, Corsair. You're mine." So they start firing away at these hunters that are crashing into the X-Mansion. And Corsair reveals their primary weakness is intense heat. My blaster slows them down. A good-sized fusion bomb would rupture the entire matrix. You wouldn't happen to have one handy. So he's always got this dry, understated, wit that basically works off of understatement. And Storm here thinks to herself as she uses her powers to keep these creatures away. On the surface, Corsair jests, yet his undertone is deadly serious. If he possessed such a weapon, he would use it, regardless of the cost to the surrounding community. And that is a major difference between father and son, and we'll see that get acknowledged at the climax of the issue. What sort of man is he? She asks herself. We need time to regain our balance, to think and plan. It is up to me to provide it. So the battle continues within the X-Mansion. Everybody using, Scott and Storm using their powers. This is a little bit more challenging than the handball game that they were engaged in earlier. Corsair using his blaster. And then in his thoughts, we learn a little bit more about these antagonists. The Sidri are freelancers working for bounty. So they've been hired to go after Corsair. The Imperial Shi'ar would never use them, so it's unlikely they came from the Dreadnought. That leaves the opposition, the traitors who kidnapped Lilandra. So we're learning more and more as the issue proceeds about what exactly happened. And Scott then is thinking to himself, even as he's evading these deadly creatures, my father alive, as a kid I dreamed of this meeting, I prayed for it. Now that it's happened, I feel happy, angry, mostly numb. I don't know what to do or say. So he has this huge revelation regarding his father being alive and the fact that he's not actually an orphan, and he's confused emotionally, but look how competent he is in terms of dealing with this deadly attack. And he takes over as what he does here is he collaborates with Storm as leader. He says to Storm, you tell me. No, she asks him, what next? And he says, you tell me, fight or run. So she makes the decision, run, and then he comes up with the plan. That's what I like here. So Storm says to him, we need the other X-Men, and we must draw these monsters away before innocent civilians become involved. So here's the plan. We'll use the Blackbird, says Scott. I'll call you over our micro transceivers when we're ready to lift off. And she replies, and I shall come. But she thinks to herself, if I'm able. And Corsair asks, what's she talking about? And Cyclops says, Storm's acting as our rear guard to buy us the time we need to reach the plane. One woman against the Sidri asks Corsair, it's the only way, come on, you can't leave her. The hangar's a mile down this tunnel, hidden beneath a copse on the estate. A copse is a group of trees, a small group of trees on the estate. Security sensors indicate neither hangar nor tunnel have been breached. This monocar will have us there in a couple of minutes. So this is all interesting detail about the complex beneath the grounds of Professor X's estate. And Corsair just feels that Scott is being cold-blooded, abandoning his friend, that she'll be torn apart by the Sidri. She's your friend, Scott, don't you care? And this is ironic, of course, because, you know, Scott's questions would be concerning, well, Corsair's abandonment of his sons, like spending 20 years in the Shi'ar Empire and the other side of the galaxy. And he's thinking here to himself, Storm, Aurora, yes, but I'll leave her just the same as I'd expect her to leave me. And like the irony of this in terms of what happened between father and son and the father's decision regarding the son. So here Storm is thinking, the Sidri are generating additional armor, making themselves more resistant to my lightning bolts, and the strain is beginning to wear me down. I cannot maintain this effort much longer. So she's in peril. Scott gets into the Blackbird. The plan works because, as she thinks to herself, this is why both Scott and I knew I had to stay, because wherever the Blackbird went, I could follow. When she was airborne, Scott could not. So the Blackbird is getting airborne here, and Chris Claremont narrating what's happening here. Seconds later, thunder ripples across the town of Salem Center, scaring everyone awakened by the crash of Corsairs Starship, as two ultra-high-performance jet engines punch 77,000 kilograms of sleek ebony aircraft straight up into the sky. That's great narration, and Claremont enjoying. And then also, this is really cool as well, we get a glimpse from Cyclops' perspective of the X-Mansion. It's been wrecked by the Sidri. My lord, he says aloud, but then thinks, Charles loved that old house. I did too. It was the only real home I remember. It'll break his heart to see it like this. And it's so interesting, you know, he's thinking about the X-Mansion, his home. It's destroyed even as he's discovered that he's got a father, but never had that full life with his father, having spent most of his teenage years until he was taken by Professor X to the X-Mansion in that orphanage in Nebraska. A very unhappy time for Scott. So here the Sidri, this is an interesting trick they can pull, where they can form a bond collective, and they turn into a ship which now flies up into the air and pursues the Blackbird. And then we switch scene to the FAA Regional Air Traffic Control Center on Long Island, responsible for routing and directing all aircraft in the New York area. So the air traffic controllers see they've got trouble on screen. It's this big blob here. What the heck is that? I don't know, but it's as big as a skyscraper. So that's the Sidri craft. And it's barreling full tilt into the most crowded airspace on Earth. And here this commercial jet just manages to bank away from the Sidri craft. And now it's pursuing the Blackbird down I think it's the East River. So they're a game of cat and mouse that begins at Manhattan's Triborough Bridge. Really cool stuff on this page. And also what I like is I like the color hold for the computer screens, for the air traffic controllers as well. It's nicely done. Really great work here. Cockrum can draw anything. Let's continue. So now we've got this dogfight between the Sidri craft and the Blackbird in Manhattan. And Cyclops here thinking, we can't use conventional weapons. They're too dangerous to others, too difficult to control. But that doesn't mean we're helpless. Far from it. I've been waiting for a chance to field test this experimental windshield. Looks like this is it. So this is interesting. So the Blackbird has been configured for the X-Men's use, but also now it's being configured so that Cyclops can fire his optic blast through the windshield without shattering it. So it's explained here in the narrative caption. As the beam hits the canopy, itself composed of a synthesis of plastiglass and ruby quartz, special polarizing elements focus and amplify its energy as a ruby does with coherent light and a laser. The effect is most impressive. So now Cyclops can fire his optic blasts concentrated out of the front of the windshield of the Blackbird, and so we get that big sound effect there, zap, as it hits the Sidri colony craft. And insofar as their foe is concerned, totally sequential. I think that's supposed to be inconsequential, I think. So a nice try, Scott. But when and here we've got a typographical error. Sidri merge into their ship matrix. The bond that links them is almost impossible to break, says Corsair. A violent dissolution will act like... So suppose we disrupt that matrix. What good will that do? A violent dissolution will act like a gigantic short circuit. It'll stun them long enough for us to escape or perhaps even destroy them. But shattering the matrix requires a phenomenal amount of energy. I doubt you can hack it alone. So they're going to have to come up with another means of disrupting the matrix ship. I like this little moment where the Blackbird is flying down one of the avenues, and we have the perspective from this restaurant and the two patrons here. Neville, that's an airplane. So it is, my dear. That's pretty dry stuff from Claremont and Cockrum. I like it. So Corsair is impressed with the flying, and he says to him here, and this is an interesting little emotional moment, very nice flying, son. I couldn't have done it better myself. Cyclops just didn't have any of that. The name is Cyclops, mister. You haven't the right to call me anything else. But back to the pressing issue at hand. Storm flies out of the Blackbird. She uses her elemental powers against the Sidri. She's trying to distract them. I must ride the winds with all my speed and skill. I'm a far smaller and agile target than the Blackbird, but I also lack its armor and defenses. It might survive a direct hit. I most certainly would not, she thinks to herself. And then what they've tried to avoid, you see the Blackbird coming up behind the Sidri craft. What they've tried to avoid, any danger to civilians, it happens here. So what happens here is as the aerial dogfight rages across the upper New York Bay, what both X-Men feared finally comes to pass. An NYPD helicopter on routine harbor patrol strays too close to the action and is mistaken by the Sidri for one of the combatants. So it's attacked, but the pilots there and the crew survive. They jump out and Storm grabs them and saves them. But then she uses her elemental powers to set up wind patterns to form a cyclone around the Sidri, and then she intensifies it. Unless the fabric of the Matrix craft is immensely strong, they must flee or be destroyed. So, is it going to work? Scott keeps blasting away at them. So Storm and Scott working in unison. Suddenly, it's the Sidri Matrix which is on the defensive, as Storm's cyclone follows it wherever it goes, while Cyclops blasts it again and again with his enhanced I-beams. It isn't long before the two-pronged attack gets results. So the Matrix is losing its cohesiveness. One hard punch should disrupt it completely. Using his optic blast like a battering ram, Cyclops smashes the Blackbird at full throttle through the heart of the alien. With an eerie, almost human shriek of agony, it shatters, its thousands of lesser selves toppling to the ground like living snow. That's a really cool shot there from Cockrum as well. So it so happens that it discorporates over a petroleum storage facility. That's handy. And basically Corsair says the Matrix is in shock now. It's vulnerable, and the most effective weapon against it is heat. Blast that tank for him. Set the oil afire, and the explosion is sure to kill it. Now we have a little moral difference between Cyclops and Corsair, between father and son. Kill it, says Cyclops. You mean that thing's alive? I thought it was a construct, a mechanism. And Corsair explains it's a colony creature, living and sentient. So what? I won't kill Corsair. This is no time for scruples, boy. It has no compunctions about killing you or anyone else who gets in its way. And he continues, you sanctimonious fool. We can't let it reintegrate. We've only seconds to act. Storm arrives back into the Blackbird seconds before what? Storm, stop him. Why? Corsair don't. So he fires his blaster and sets the petroleum tanks alight, burning up the Sidri. Now we can go, he says, as the Blackbird swoops away. That's a really cool panel there. And you can see, again, white media cut into the blast lines there. Really nice work on this particular page. And again, that, in the climax of the story, we get a very clear moral distinction between Cyclops and Corsair. Corsair is willing to kill this creature. Cyclops very much reluctant to kill any sentient being. And that, of course, has to do with the fact that Cyclops was brought up, in effect, by Professor X. And so he's a much more compassionate and pacifist person than his father. So what about the refinery workers, Corsair asks Cyclops, the firemen who'll risk their lives to extinguish that blaze, the cost and pollution to the environment. Did you consider that? Did you care? So Corsair says, callous as it sounds, Cyclops, all of that is negligible, even expendable. You worry about a few score lives. I'm trying to save a world, this world. So now we're getting to the point. Why has he come to Earth? Why did he come to contact the X-Men? So we're going to get an explanation. Cyclops says, all right, mister, drop the other shoe. Explain yourself. Why does the Earth need saving and from whom? And here we get it at the end of the story. 10 standard days ago, a meeting of the Shi'ar Grand Council was raided by a terrorist commando force. Most of the ministers were slaughtered in the attack, some executed even after they'd surrendered. And I like the detail that the Shi'ar Grand Council is populated obviously by a variety of alien races. The Landra was kidnapped. My Starjammers and I were implicated, and the trail left by the terrorists led straight to Earth. A fast battle force led by Chancellor Araki and Admiral of the Fleet Lord Samadar set out immediately to rescue her. That's Araki there. Lead elements of the force have already arrived in local Earth space. We saw that earlier in the issue. They're prepared to go to any lengths to liberate their Empress or avenge her. And if in the process they have to reduce the Earth to a lifeless, burned out cinder, so be it. So that's a hell of a cliffhanger. So now the stakes are the world. So since John Byrne left the X-Men title with issue 143, we haven't had any, grand major storylines like the Dark Phoenix saga or Days of Future Past. But we're going to get one now as Cockrum and Claremont put the X-Men into space. We're going to get an epic storyline finally. And here in the letters page, we've letters about issue 149 and also king-sized annual number 5. Next issue, fireworks between Corsair and Cyclops, a foe from Ms. Marvel's past, a guest appearance by Tigra. And will any of it matter as the Earth itself faces sudden death? In 30 days, true believers, Deathbird, another interesting character to be introduced into the X-Men mythos. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 154. Let me know what you think about this issue in the comments below the video. If you enjoyed my review, please like the video on YouTube. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.